Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to Business Innovators Radio. With me today, I have high performance coach Mike McDonnell, and he is an expert in helping people to get into the state that allows them to successfully build their businesses from the very beginning and then at all levels throughout. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Luana. How are you doing?
Well, I am awesome, and I particularly am very excited about this interview because I don't know how many times you've interviewed me for various things,
Yeah.
And now here we are with the roles reversed.
Tables are turned.
Love it. So today is all about how to take off the brakes to be able to fly in your business. So will you elaborate a bit on what you mean by being able to take off the brakes? What are those brakes?
Well, a lot of the brakes are self-imposed, so we tend to create them ourselves. And what I refer to it as is we're taught things like hustle and working all the time and, not sleeping a lot because, you can't work when you're asleep and all those sorts of things. But that's almost like being on a treadmill or being on a spinning bike as a personal trainer in my previous life. So when you're on a spinning bike, you can go as fast as you want, but the bike isn't actually going anywhere. And that's what it can feel like for a lot of people because they're not actually making progress. That seems to be what the sort of defining line between doing things that make you move forwards and doing things that don't make you move forwards. That's what tends to lead to being, stuck and having these breaks. So when we remove the breaks, we realize that we actually progress easier. We don't have to work as hard, or should we say, it doesn't feel as hard. So we can still go just as fast. We can still do the 15-hour days. We can still do all of those things, but without the brakes holding us, we go a lot further. So that's what I would refer to when I say that.
Awesome. And what kind of things could the listeners achieve if they could only take off those brakes? What are the possibilities?
Well, I think a lot of the possibilities are we make progress more peacefully. And I say that because a lot of people think that being stressed out is like a normal thing. I'm stressed out or I'm anxious or, that's just the barrier for entry for being successful. And the difference is people that make it, they just handle stress better. It's not that they're in different situations. It's not that, that they're not putting themselves out there. So the difference is how they handle it and how often they can keep doing it. If you're in a stressful place and it takes you a week to recover because you're not fully capable of handling the stress that you put yourself under, you're only going to be able to do that once a week. But if someone's maybe a bit more, I guess, stable or a bit more like free-flowing or whatever, term you want to give it, you can put yourself under similar situations more often because you're able to, remove the negativity a lot easier, not hold on to positivity all that well either, because, if you start thinking you're amazing and you go into the, real world in air quotes and you get hit in the face, like you're not used to that. So sometimes it's about getting used to the adversity more than just, having an easy ride all the time, because you'd be surprised how many people fail, not because they can't handle it, but because they've never handled it before. It's the first time they have to deal with it, the first time they get rejected or the first time they're in a place whereby they feel like they're not going anywhere, even though they probably are, they just don't realize it yet. That's enough to make people stop. That's enough to make people not really achieve the success that they want when, at least 90% of businesses that make it, they're just simply there because they didn't stop. That's pretty much one of the defining traits is a lot of businesses succeed because of consistency, because of not stopping, more than you're being better than somebody else.
Absolutely. That's so true. Like it's the thing that every successful person has in common, isn't it? They carried on going. Everyone. So yeah, really, really agree with you on that one. And also about what you were saying about the, things are always going to happen. Things are always going to happen, no matter what we're doing in life, and especially if we're pushing ourselves more to achieve things. We can't stop things from going wrong. Well, we can sometimes, but there's always going to be things that are out of our control. But it's how we react to them that counts, isn't it?
It is, and you see this quite a lot as well. Like particularly if people are trying to do the bigger actions, so to speak. A lot of business owners, they want to write a book, or they want to get into the media, or they want to be on TV. So some of these things that are seen as higher profile actions, they tend to lend themselves over to, you might get one, but everybody else is probably going to say no. And sometimes the ends don't justify the means to a certain extent. You're always going to get less than what you put in. The 50 pitches to get one back. So, well, what if I only sent one and I get one back? And it's like, well, you don't know which one is going to be the yes. So you may as well just keep sending them and keep going and keep working, because you never know which one's going to come back.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So what was it that brought you to this stage? Like, what was the thing that, when did you get your realization that this is what you're on the planet to help people with?
Well, a lot of the lessons that I learned were actually from the health conditions that I have. So I have cystic fibrosis and I'm also diabetic. So from an early age, it was about, okay, I need morning routines, I need habits. Sometimes you've got to do it even if you don't want to do it. Sometimes you just got to get out of bed even though you don't want to. You physically struggle, but you just got to keep going. It's a hardship that makes you stronger at the end of the day. So if you can handle it on a bad day, you can more than handle it on a good day. So these are all things that you learn on a day-to-day basis, living with conditions when every day could be completely different. I woke up this morning as of recording this, and the sort of atmosphere changed overnight. So I was up at about 2 o'clock this morning. I was then up at about 4 o'clock this morning, then about 6 o'clock this morning, and then my alarm finally woke me up at 7, and I felt not so great. So I had to sort of readjust my morning. I had to adjust my morning routine, a whole heap of other stuff to get me back into the phase of, right, well, I've got this interview today, so I've got to make sure that I put the extra work in to make sure that I actually give my best to the things that I need to do. Now, if I was having a good day, my morning routine might change because I need to do less to keep myself in the best state that I need to be in. And this is all on a daily basis. I've got tools that are in the toolbox versus a set routine. If I have a set routine, so it's almost like stretching or exercise. And if you do it all the time, it loses the benefit. If you stretch every single day, twice a day, yeah, you'll be flexible, but the stretching will feel like you're not getting the benefit because you do it all the time. Your body adapts to it, and then you kind of lose the return on the investment. It's the same with doing things like, if you journal every single day, eventually the journaling will be like less than a page long because you've wrote everything down. So you sort of run out of stuff to write if you write it all down. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. Is it's all well and good having the routines and the ability to grind it through if you need to and push through if you need to, and also have the amazing day that you might have once a week or once a month or once a year, depending on how bad things actually are. But that's what it's all about. The lessons that you learn having every day that could be completely different, something could change that completely throws off your entire day. It teaches you that sometimes you've got to stay calm even when you're in a stressful situation. Sometimes you've got to regulate yourself so that you can respond to situations better because of the state you're in, and not get caught up in the situation itself. And I know you talk a lot about, how to help people that do things like the media and write their books and go on tours and things. And it's hard for people that can't actually handle it. It's hard for people that let the excitement get to them. And that's what it's all about, is being able to handle that, almost like fix your crown almost, and keep striding forwards. That's kind of how you've got to go about doing things. And I learned that from an early age.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this. So last night you had a rubbish night's sleep. Now, I don't know about you, but if I've had a night like that, I just feel like death the next day. So, and I don't have cystic fibrosis. I'm not diabetic. I don't have any conditions like that. And even so, I will feel like death. Now, I'd love to know today, how did you get because you're coming across really well, you seem full of energy. How did you get from that state into the state where you're ready, you're focused, and you are smashing your interview? Where did what were the steps that you took to get into that state?
Well, luckily, over the years anyway, it's kind of like, well, you know what to do when you notice the symptoms. So if this was my first rodeo, I would struggle anyway, because I've not had a lot of sleep. I'd probably have to cancel the interview because I've not got the energy to perform well, and that's just the reality. Like, you sometimes just got to accept the kind of state that you're in. But if you've got the tools that you can use, I do, if I'm not feeling that energetic, I force myself to do things that make me feel energetic. So there's that crossover between sometimes feelings cause you to do things, and then sometimes when you do something, you get the feeling afterwards. Almost like you don't like going to the gym, but you feel better after you've warmed up. Like once you get going, start getting things going, you feel like you might actually get a workout in. It's the same sort of thing. It's it's two-way street. People don't realize that, but it is. If you don't feel like doing something, well, you might feel better after you did it. I can't tell you how many times I've hated being on camera, but I do it, and then I feel better afterwards, because you get the endorphin, you get the feel-good feeling of helping people with the content or the videos or whatever it happens to be. Sometimes you can feel good after you've done the thing, and that's what it's about. So whether it's do a quick sort of jog on the spot, do a couple of laps of the house, I have an extra cup of tea that morning. I make sure I knock a couple of things off my to-do list. So like small things to sort of make me feel like I'm doing something. And I treat it as a warm-up. Like, you got to warm up to your day almost if you don't feel like it. And that's the routine that I do generally go through, because I feel like if I can't give my best, then there's a reason for it. And that's the reason that is kind of the cause of everything that you then have to go away and deal with. Otherwise, it's going to keep recurring.
Okay. So if you were just going back to what we were talking about earlier, you were saying that it's really important, first of all, for people to realize where they're at.
Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about that? How can they figure out where they're at, and what benefits does that have?
I think a big part of it comes down to being slightly humble around your situation. So if you're trying to grow your business, and I mean, we spoke about this before we clicked record, Luana, but if you want to do the bigger actions, that's fine, but you've got to realize that no one goes from nowhere to speaking on stage to thousands of people. Like, it doesn't happen all that often. But if you've got a speaker portfolio and you spoke on stage a couple of times with sort of hundreds of people to thousands of people, and they got good feedback from that, you're more likely to get the bigger stages. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me for previous things that I've done.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's the same as well with media. Media leads to more media.
Yeah, it does. It does, definitely.
And it's exactly the same. People might, I think, see if you agree with this. I feel that sometimes it can be a form of self-sabotage. So somebody might say, oh, I'm not going to bother speaking on that stage, or I'm not going to bother going on that local TV network because I only want to do these big, huge ones. But then, it's like steps that they need to take. And so in not taking those first steps, they're sabotaging their chances. Do you think that's a mindset issue?
I think it could be. I think there's an element of, because we don't, or most people anyway, don't really know what the behind the scenes is actually like. Like, I know we've had numbers of conversations, right, around people don't understand what it's like to get the exposure that they actually want to get. And it's the same with like being in TV. Like a lot of actors don't understand what it's like to, constantly be on auditions and keeping yourself sort of reasonably healthy all year round, because you never know what the expectations of the part are going to be. And you might not even get it, but you've got to be prepared for it in case you do get it. Mm-hmm. So how do we go about it? Well, the truth is some people don't like the actual truth of the situation. Like when you're told, okay, by the way, 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get this thing. So you've got to have a plan B while committing to the plan A. Like you can't go all in to something. And especially if there's a very low success rate, like if you haven't got a plan B with anything that you're doing, then you're not going to be able to keep moving forward. So you need to have a backup, you need to have a contingency, you need to have a what's next. If someone was to say to you, okay, you've not got this, what's next? And you can't answer that, then you've got a bit of an issue. Because the way the world works is you're not going to get everything that you put yourself out there to try and get. So with that in mind, you've got to get yourself in that habit of constantly moving forwards, and quite simply, if you think about it as well, like as things grow and as things build, you might get more yeses than nos. You might do. And when you get over that hump of getting 1 every 100 or every 200, and suddenly you start getting 3 every 100 and then 10 every 100, and then gradually you start, well, maybe I might get a bit more specific with the actions that I take. Maybe it's not about doing thousands of things. Once you've figured out what the system is, you might only need to do 10 and get 5. And that's the process that you've got to go through. But people that are just starting out going, well, I'm not going to do it unless it's 10,000 people, or I'm not going to do it unless it's, I don't know, a big name. And I'm not going to do that because I'm not a big name yet. Unfortunately, that sort of saying that people have inside their heads of, I'm not ready for this yet, the problem with that is it could be true or it could be false. So when people turn around and go, oh, well, I'm not good enough to do that yet, the truth is you don't know unless you ask. You've got no idea. And, I've done it several times where I've tried. I've knocked on a reasonably big door and I got told no. And I go, right, well, what's it going to take for me to get that then? Like if that's something that you're aiming for and you get told no, you got to think, right, well, what's below that then? What level do I? So you've got to, it's almost like you shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you aim amongst the stars. There's nothing wrong with trying to get to the moon, but you've got to be okay with the stars. And where you're at is where you land. Where you're at isn't like, I'm just going to stay still because I'm not there yet. You don't know where you're at until you actually try and you figure out where you end up. Like I've had this sort of dream of being on some big names podcasts, and I realized long ago that you're never going to get on them unless you've actually been on smaller ones. You're never going to, you need to have, okay, where have you been before? You need to have the answer to that question, otherwise it's not going to happen. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is you've got to realize where you're at and then think, right, Because if you think like, well, I know we sort of name dropped Tim Ferriss before we started, and that's one of the shows I would love to be on because I quite like the way Tim thinks.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, that'd be really cool. Then I thought, well, I'm not going to get on Tim's show, but if I've been on 10,000 other smaller shows, I might get his attention. And
yeah, that's it.
Might sound silly as well, but there's more of them. So if you're someone that wants an interview every month or an interview every week, got news for you. If you don't shoot for Tim Ferriss and there's smaller ones, there's hundreds of them out there. So you can have one every week if you wanted, but they're not going to be like, Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan and Gary Vee. They're going to be like the smaller ones. But if you're someone that likes to be interviewed, like I like to be interviewed, that's kind of one of my things. It's kind of like, well, I may as well do that because I feel good when I help people in this format. And at the same time, I've got something that I can refer back to, something that I can reuse. Now, do I hate myself because I'm not, of a standard that I can get onto the bigger names platforms for? No, I don't, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean like if you go on a big name show, that also doesn't mean that you've made it in business. Like it's not one of your I've made it scenarios, because it doesn't last. So when you realize that, okay, it's not going to be the top of the pile just yet, you've got to be okay with where you land. You've got to be okay with, this is your starting point. This is the place where you're at right now. This is where you're at. And if you don't like that, that's okay, because you're allowed to change it. You're allowed to, but you've got to be okay to stay there for a time. You can't just go, okay, I'm at the bottom of the heap now, but I'm not going to take any actions here. I'm only going to take the bigger actions. But the problem is the bigger actions will just keep telling you no all the time, and then you'll get used to being rejected, and you'll just admit defeat almost and just not try. So you've got to...
absolutely.
You have to balance out the fact that, okay, I'm not quite there yet, but that's not going to stop me from doing my thing on the platforms or the places or the situations that you can actually handle. There's the difference between a local event and a worldwide event. There's nothing stopping you from being at a local event. But if you try and get on a national event, maybe you'll get turned down because there's thousands of others that are trying to get onto the same spot. Where a local event, there might only be like 10, because not everybody can go to a local event.
So apply for them all.
Yeah, exactly right.
Because you never know. You might get in, and if you don't, that's okay, because you've already applied to the smaller ones as well.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that people need to think about is that no isn't a forever thing if you're always improving.
Yeah, true.
So it's not forever. So like in about a year's time, I might be able to get on to Tim's show if I don't stop. Getting back to what we said before, if I get a no and then I think, well, I'm awful, then there's no point in carrying on. Like it's going to stay a no because I've not done anything to improve my own situation or my own standing, if you will, so that I'm more likely of it to be a yes next time. So that's what people have to realize is no isn't forever. Nothing's really forever unless you don't change it. I've got a couple of things that I'm working on. So in about 6 months, it's not going to be the same as what it is now. In 3 months, it probably isn't going to be the same as it is now. But sometimes, like, this is the thing that I actually toyed with this the other day. Sometimes the level of acceptance that you have can actually be a bad thing. You can accept it all you want, but that shouldn't put you in a place of complete acceptance of that's the way it is. And that's the only way it's going to be. So I'm all for accepting where you're at. I'm all for trying to feel good about that, but you can be happy while striving for more. Like that's not, it can feel like a contradiction, but that's a practice that you can do every day. And it's something that I do every day, or I try my best to do every day. And I know there's hundreds of people that also do the same. That's what it's about. It's about feeling okay with where you're at while understanding that you're working towards more. You're working towards more of what you want at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. But sometimes for high achievers, it can be so easy, just to constantly be looking ahead and thinking about what they haven't achieved yet because they haven't got there yet. But it's never ending. You know, there's always more levels we can go to. So I think that was a really important point. It's really important to also be happy with where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it? I mean, I know you know this. I'm kind of preaching to the converted quite a lot here, but it's something that it's called the practice, because at every moment in time you're going to question it. Every moment in time you're going to wonder if it's even worth it anymore. You're going to wonder if you are actually good enough, without realizing that, you know, people don't become world number 1 at anything without being world number 10 first and world number 30 first. You know, like one of the sports I used to play was tennis, and you don't get to from 0 to world number 1. You've got to get to the top 1,000 and the top 10,000 and the top 100,000, because being the top 100,000th tennis player in the world is still pretty good if you think about how many people actually play the game. And
damn right.
that's what it's all about. Sometimes it's that shift in perspective, and you're never gonna also get there without practice. So I know with like soccer or football, depending on where you're based, you do get scouted by someone that thinks that you're good, and then you go to the other teams, and that's how you can get in. But with tennis, it's about win-loss percentages, and it's about playing in the right tournaments while building up your experience. So that's the difference. Is tennis is about experience. You don't get experience without actually stepping up. But if you turn around and go, I'm not going to try unless it's Wimbledon or unless it's the US Open, I'm not even going to put the work in. Well, like, in some regards, like, well, who are you to think that you can just walk into the US Open without playing matches for 20 years, like for 10 years? It just doesn't make sense. So that's why there's a barrier for entry for these things, is you're just not good enough. And to a certain extent, I mean, I know I had a bit of an ego trip like a couple of years ago. It was like, who am I to think that I could just waltz on as a startup and rock on to the Tim Ferriss show? It's like, who do I think I am? And, you know, like, it was like, I'm just like stupid to think that that's even possible. So that's a bit of a hard-hitting thing for me, and maybe your listeners might take it home in that, look, you're not ready yet. Like, you've got to have things under your belt first, and you've got to accept the fact that you're not good enough. You've got to be okay with that. I'm all for positive thinking. I'm all for it. You know, it's one of the things that I help people with. But you've got to ride the line between, you've just got to accept, you know, you're just not there yet. And, you know, that was one of the conversations I actually had with myself inside my own head, a little bit more unfiltered than normal. But who am I to think that I can do this without actually putting any effort in at all? Like, who am I to think that I can rock up and get these amazing things without actually achieving anything myself? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So because of that, I rolled up my sleeves and I got to work. And that sometimes people need that. Sometimes people need the element of, look, you can't just get everything that you want for nothing. Like, everything's got a price, whether it's time, energy, money, whatever it is, everything's got a price, and you've got to work for it. And that's something that I had to realize before I actually put the work in, because until then, I was sort of a little bit disillusioned when I first started. Why isn't it working? And it was like, well, you're not really putting the effort in. It doesn't. Doesn't really work otherwise. So sometimes it is the harsh truth that makes people actually do something about their situation. You know, you're not going to get the bigger opportunities or the bigger actions business-wise without doing the smaller things. And a lot of it is hard at the beginning. You know, the hardest moments of pushing this boulder is the first push is always the hardest. But once it gets rolling, it'll get easier with less effort because it's already moving. You know, it's hard to slow something down if it's always moving.
Yeah, totally. Awesome, Mike. Lots of gold there. Now, let people know. So if there are people listening now who want to find out more about you, maybe even work with you in the future, where can they find you?
Well, I spend most of my time on social media. So you can find me on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Also have a website, which is mikemcdonald.online, because the .com was taken. And that's where I've got my blog on there. I'll put all the social media stuff on there as well. I've also got my own podcast, which is Business on the Beach, which you can subscribe to there and get everything that I do on there with interviews like this one and several other things as well. So yeah, I'm all over the place.
Awesome. So maybe just Google Mike McDonnell and it'll be full of Mikeness.
Oh, great big picture of me. God forbid.
Right, before we finish off, it is time. Do you know what time it is, Mike?
Well, where I am, it's almost 4:00, so...
And that means it's get in the bin time. Now, I'm not asking you to get in the bin, so don't worry. What I am going to ask you to do, though, is to think of one business practice or idea that you don't like, that you want to eliminate. And you're going to get to do that today. You're going to get to throw it in the bin. What's it going to be, Mike?
Is it just one? Because I've got several.
Hey, it's just one. You only get one.
I have to pick one. It probably has to be adding somebody on a social media account and then messaging them straight away. Drives me insane.
Go on, tell me why it drives you insane.
Well, I think it works for people that I guess don't also know what they're doing. Like they add someone on Facebook and send them a message asking them to buy something, or it's the old sort of LinkedIn like and message sort of deal, and it drove me insane. And I don't like it. I don't do it, and it just does my head in because it's like, well, you know about me, otherwise you wouldn't have added me. So asking me what I do is a bit pointless. You wouldn't have added me otherwise. And the only other way that you would have messaged me is if you wanted to sell me something. And I'm sorry, but I've got no clue who you are, so I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know if I want it or not. So it doesn't make sense. That this is why, like, when I add someone, I engage with them on their stuff first. I don't message them. It doesn't make sense to message them because I add people that I'm interested in, and I'm interested in them, therefore I engage with their stuff. Like I don't engage with their stuff if I'm not interested, so it doesn't make sense to add someone and message them because you wouldn't have added them if you didn't want to get along with them or you didn't want to get to know them, or it just doesn't make sense, Luana. It just doesn't make sense. And it drives me insane because it's like they assume that we don't know. That's the worst thing. It's like they almost assume that I don't know what I'm doing, therefore I'm naive enough to, I wonder what the message is. I'm going to miraculously sign up for some course or Bitcoin mining thing or multi-level marketing thing, which drove my head in when I was a personal trainer. I got hundreds of these nutritional supplements will change their life.
Oh, no.
And I'm just like, look, I'm not being funny, but I get like hundreds a day, so they all look the same. That's the worst thing. They always look the same. All the posts look exactly the same. I'm sure there's some guy out there or girl, right, teaching them this stuff and giving them all the same template to use. It drives me nuts. So if there's one thing I could put in the bin.
It's gone. It's in the bin.
Woohoo! Get in.
Awesome, Mike. You have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been amazing. I've enjoyed it.
Any final words for our listeners?
I think the last thing I do want to say is knowing where you're at right now doesn't mean that you can't improve stuff. So while it's probably a negative experience to start with, the whole sort of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually awful at this thing. The first time we do anything is probably the worst anyway. My first podcast was awful. My first blog was awful. My first video looked like I was reading off a sheet of paper and like a robot, because I was, right? I was actually reading off a piece of paper because I couldn't remember my lines properly. So it was a bit awkward. That was the first one that I did when I was 16, and you just sort of keep going. And it's not good. It's awful. I hate how I sound. I don't think I listen to my podcast back either because I hate how I sound. But I know for a fact that it's not going to stop me from doing it either. So sometimes the mission has to be better than your excuses for not taking action. And understanding that you're not a fixed thing. You can improve all the time. And the only way you can improve is by knowing where you're at. You need to be self-aware enough to know what your strengths are, weaknesses are, what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you want to improve on, what you actually don't really want to do either. Because I wanted to improve my videos. I could have quite easily have gone, doesn't really interest me, so I'm not going to do it. You wouldn't know that unless you actually figured out your starting point. And you know what to improve on, what to discard, and everything else. It's all a self-awareness game when it comes down to it. And most people, they won't do the work because it's not a pleasant experience. And the problem is unless it's a negative one, we don't have a reason to change. If it's positive, we'll think we're amazing. We think there's nothing to change if we always have a good experience. We go through our day, nothing bad happens. Great, get up. Do it again. But if something awful happens that you could have prevented, there's a lesson there that you can go away and improve on. But it's after the negative thing. It's not after the positive thing. So that's what I would say. Is it might be a negative. It might not be helpful in the moment because you've got to put yourself through your paces, right? It's not always a positive thing. But if you can go through it and get to the other side of it, then you'll be better off, and then the people that you serve with your business will be better off as well. So that's what I would say. It's all a game of self-awareness, and it's going to be negative. It's not going to be good, but that's what leads to the biggest change in yourself.
So there we go. Try it, keep improving, and just keep working on it. Awesome. Right. Once again, thank you, Mike. And to everybody listening, thanks for listening. From me, Luana Ribeira, and Mike McDonnell, just remember, you weren't born to be ordinary, you were born to shine.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.